Last night, Piers Morgan did a 2-hour interview on his YouTube channel, Piers Morgan Uncensored, with far-right commentator Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is an extremist. He's no doubt captivating and sometimes funny, but he's also, frankly, insane and a bigot. Maybe you think I'm wrong. Maybe you think my comments are ill-judged. Well, watch this and judge for yourself.
The beauty of what I'm going to talk to you about in this interview is that almost all of it is just going to be reminding you what you have said and asking you what you meant. Your position about that story is that it was a joke, okay? I want to come to something else you said. This is where you talk about Jews, women, and blacks. Let's just take a listen.
They're always coming up with, no, it's not the Jews. No, it's not women. No, it's not blacks. It's actually really complicated. No, it fucking isn't at all. Jews are running society. Women need to shut the fuck up. Blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part. And we would live in paradise. It's that simple.
Okay. Would you like to clarify what you meant there?
That's all true. That's 100% true. Everything I said in that clip is true.
Including that blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part.
Yeah. Yes.
But all of them?
No, for the most part.
What does the most part mean? What percentage of American blacks would you like to see in prison?
Whatever the percentages of the murderers. I think it's 1 in 20 black men will commit a murder in their lifetime. So maybe let's say that, 5%.
Oh, so you're talking about black people who murder people?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I'll tell you, black people agree with me because they're tired of it too. And maybe not most of them, but a lot of them agree with what I say about that because they know how it is. That's why the first thing they do when they make a little bit of money is they go and leave to another neighborhood.
Okay. So what was just remind me again, the percentage of black men who commit murder in America. What was the percentage you gave me?
It's 1 in 20. 1 in 20.
It's 1 in 100.
No, it's 1 in 20.
No. Less than 1 in 100 black US men commit murder. That's the most up-to-date crime statistics in America.
That's not true. I've seen other statistics. They say 1 in 20 will eventually commit a murder.
So your rate means that you're saying that 5 times as many black men commit murder as the official crime statistics say?
Yeah, there's a report, I believe, on X by Data Hazard. I'll have to go and double check that for you. But yes, there's some pretty shocking evidence that says that it's far more alarming than you would think. But I mean, whether it's 1 in 20 or 1 in 100, that's a lot of people, Piers. I mean,
sure,
this is
a lot of white
problem.
people commit murder too. Well, they do, don't they?
Okay, but it's about proportionality. I mean, white people are 65% of the population. Blacks are 13%. And I think anybody would tell you that more black people proportionally commit violent crime than white people, and people vote with their feet. People would rather pay a much higher property tax.
Most mass shootings.
What's with the interruptions?
I'm sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, you look at in Chicago, in New York, these neighborhoods are so stratified. People would rather pay a high tax rate. They'd rather pay a much higher property value to live in a less diverse, less black neighborhood because they don't want to live around the violence. And I think that when you look at even on the public transit, the subway, the blue line, you know, people don't want to go there because they know who occupies and menaces the public transit. It is these people like Daniel Penny had to deal with. It's people like Irina Zarutska had to deal with. And that's just the uncomfortable reality.
So much nonsense here. That final comment, people are willing to pay more to not live in diverse communities like San Francisco and New York. Are you crazy? 2 very diverse, multiracial places which have a premium if you want to live there. Same with London. These are cheap hellholes and people pay more money to live elsewhere. Are you kidding? No, London is the most expensive place to live in the UK. And just to be clear on the homicide rate thing, because this is key. Firstly, he's saying, well, what's the difference between 1 in 20 and 1 in 100? The difference is 5 times. But importantly, Piers Morgan wasn't correct. The JAMA network has data regarding homicide offences between 2000 and 2019 for black males aged 15 to 24 who committed homicide, which of course is going to be, they're the most likely because it's younger people. It's 74.6 per 100,000. 74.6 per 100,000 of black males aged 15 to 24 between 2000 and 2019. 74 per 100,000. Not 1 in 20. Okay? 74 per 100,000. For black males aged 25 to 44, it falls to 70 per 100,000. Not 1 in 20, not 1 in 100, significantly low. I mean, 1 in 20, Kieran, is so insane. It's kind of like what a civil war would be like that. And I know he would probably say rhetorically, well, it's like a civil war. No, it's nothing like a civil war. You're saying that from the comfort of your studio, making loads of money, getting the super chats. This is wild, right? I mean, just having his numbers so far off. And I know somebody like Nick Fuentes doesn't care about numbers. He cares about vibe and aesthetics and being captivating and being funny. That's all he cares about. But he's out by so much, you immediately just think, this guy's a moron. I mean, Alex Jones would say wild shit all the time. He would very rarely get something that wrong.
But he's drawing on a rich reservoir of white supremacy in the United States when he says that it's a civil war. Civil war was what was invoked during Reconstruction after the American Civil War in the 1860s and 1870s and 1880s by the Ku Klux Klan. Civil war is what was invoked in the early 20th century by the lynch mobs who would lynch African Americans across America. And civil war was what was invoked as well by the kind of American Nazi Party and the remnants of the Ku Klux Klan in the 1950s and 60s with the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Panthers and so on. Civil war is exactly what he wants. And that's why he's saying 1 in 20, precisely because those are the kind of statistics you would expect to see in a civil war. He knows the difference. I don't think he's particularly clever, but he's clever enough to know that it's not 1 in 20. I'm confident of that. But he wants his disciples, his acolytes, to believe that white people are engaged in a civil war with African Americans and non-whites in the United States. And as I say, there's a rich kind of intellectual lineage to draw on in that. Final point about him, I think, is that I think Western discourse over the past 15, 20 years, it's almost like a game of Jenga has been being played by would-be political entrepreneurs. Let's see who can say the most outrageous thing. Let's see how outrageous we can possibly be until the whole thing comes tumbling down. So pushing the envelope further and further and seeing how far you get. And to me, Nick Fuentes is kind of just like the logical conclusion, the kind of, platonic ideal of that kind of game of Jenga, of sort of plastic fascist shithousery.
Yeah. I mean, again, just going back to this number, he starts out by saying most African Americans, most black people should be in prison. Most, as in a majority, presumably 51% at least. And then he's challenged on that and he says, well, okay, the people that kill other people, it's 1 in 20. Of course, that's not most, right? That would be 5% of the male black population. Of course, that number is wildly out by orders of magnitude. So what he's instead saying is that when it comes to black males 25 to 44, it's 70 per 100,000. Mm-hmm. He's saying those people should be in prison. Guess what? Of course they should be in prison if they killed somebody. Mm-hmm. That's actually not a radical statement, but you're right. He's saying this stuff, trying to talk it into reality. Now let's go back to that interview.
I'm a new generation of white person. I'm not living around blacks. Sorry. You know, I want white kids, and I don't want my white kids bringing home black people to marry. It's racial for me. And call me racist. Oh, very Christian of you. I don't give a fuck.
I mean, it couldn't be clearer, really, unless you want to say that's another of your jokes. But you're basically saying, yeah, I'm a racist, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
You're fine with saying you're a racist?
Totally. I think everybody's racist. I think everybody, if we're being honest, is racist. I think everybody, the only people that aren't racist or pretend not to be are white people to their detriment. Everybody else is racist.
But earlier in the interview, you really got aggrieved at the idea that your father was a racist. You wanted to make emphatically
because
sure
my father's...
He's not.
Because my father doesn't share my same views on that.
So he's the exception to the everyone's a racist.
Well, everybody's a little bit racist. You're right. So maybe everybody. The difference is you're attacking my father. You know, he could get fired from his job.
I'm not attacking your father.
You are.
No, I'm not. I don't know your father. And to be clear, I have no knowledge about him at all.
Well, then let's leave him out of it.
Well,
let's leave him out of it if you don't know him.
Hang on, Nick. You put that story into the public domain on your show. I'm simply reminding you of what you told everybody, millions of people, about your father. If you now want to retract it, fine. If you want to say it was a joke, which is what your position was earlier, fine. But I'm allowed to put to you things you've said publicly. That's not unfair. That's not me targeting your father. You put that story about him out there.
You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing.
I'm asking you about a pretty shocking anecdote, which to me looked like you were saying your father made decisions about where you as a family would eat based on skin color of people who worked at these places. If you say, or use them, if you say that is not what you meant, that's fine. You can respond any way you like. But the idea I can't ask you about it without you saying I'm attacking your father is ridiculous.
Well, you are, and you know what you're doing. And there's a political culture in America where if you have the wrong views, you get fired from your job. And my father has a job. And if you go on here and say, you charge him with racism or something, and I'm put in a position where I don't look like I'm sticking to my guns if I don't say my father's a racist, you're putting him in jeopardy, and he's not here to defend himself or explain his views. And it's very low, and I think you know exactly what you're doing, and people can see what you're doing. I'll defend my views, and I think that, you know, so let's leave him out of it. Let's just not talk about my father because my father isn't here. I'm here.
Okay, well,
I'll
then do you accept that you shouldn't talk?
I'll defend the anecdote.
Listen, that's fine. But then do you accept you shouldn't talk about your father on your show? And you shouldn't tell...
Absolutely not. Absolutely
not.
So
it's fine for you to put a story out there which would make most people who listened to that story or watched it at the time on your show conclude that he was racist. It's fine for you to do that. But if I then ask you about it, I'm the one who's being unfair and I've crossed a line. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you're being malicious.
Okay.
Get him, Piers. Piers really cooked him. He really snapped him up. That was like COVID era Piers Morgan. That was top tier Piers Morgan. I was cheering for Piers Morgan. That doesn't happen very often. But it's true. On the one hand, he's saying, my father isn't a racist. How dare you? And then he's saying immediately afterwards, everybody's a little bit racist. Piers Morgan shoots back. You've talked about your father and saying he's not racist. A very obvious, clear contradiction. This, by the way, isn't the first 20 minutes of the interview. And he falls to pieces. He actually looks incredibly fragile. Some people in the comments saying, why are you talking about Nick Fuentes? The reason we're talking about him is he has a huge platform. I watched this interview. I couldn't believe how fragile he was under even the slightest scrutiny. That doesn't mean that Piers Morgan's going to persuade any of his followers or supporters, viewers. Of course not. I don't think that for a second. But I was expecting something a bit more robust. Like Andrew Tate is a fast-talking, intelligent person. This guy was a chump. He just collapsed like a house of cards.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say we're talking about him. It's not like we talk about him often or that we necessarily will again soon. But I think it's important to talk about him because what I said earlier about the Jenga playing and the discourse going further and further right until it reaches this logical conclusion is that could be very academic or contained if it weren't the case that some of these Jenga players are rifling into the corridors of power across the world. And some, you know, what Nick Fuentes does speak to is a certain constituency of people who are just very, very blatantly racist in the American body politic and body politic across Europe that's growing, unfortunately. So I think it's important to talk about it and to, as you say, explore how fragile it is. And on the fragility, it speaks to a cosmic truth about white right-wingers, which is that they are such snowflakes. They're so fragile. Every year has been a vintage year recently for white wine. You know, the guy, just as you say, crumbles as soon as he is subjected to any degree of scrutiny. He takes it extremely personally that his dad's blatantly racist views are being called out. And what these people really believe in is total freedom of speech for them. They can be as offensive as they want. They can inspire as much violence against ethnic minorities as they like. But as soon as their untrammeled right to say anything, to say everything, is challenged in any way, shape, or form, they fall to pieces. They are enormous snowflakes and sensitive, shrinking violets. And that's the most hilarious thing about them, because they put such an enormous premium on machismo and masculinity and macho-ness, and how woke my virus is destroying because it's making weak people. And actually, there it is, perfectly encapsulated and crystallized. Such unbelievable weakness.
I think also this is an advert for what happens when you don't talk or debate with people that disagree with you. Nick Fuentes, for quite justifiable reasons, right? He's only just been remonetized by YouTube recently. He doesn't have these conversations with people that disagree with him. So then Piers Morgan says, well, you've said this. You said most black people should be locked up. Why? Well, for this reason, 1 in 20 of them commit homicide. Well, actually, it's 1 in 100. Actually, it's 70 in 100,000. It just falls apart. Now, I'm not saying that, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Not always. No. But it tells you something, right? And I think the left made that mistake for a pretty long time, that, you can just have conversations with each other. Nobody can challenge you. What happens at the end of that process after a few years, your arguments don't make much sense, because true knowledge comes through doubt. And dare I say, Nick Fuentes, by that response, he might have some daddy issues. Now, let's look at Fuentes again on crime and race.
If you're in a high school and truly, if you see a white person who looks like a little autistic, he's got the SSRI stare and he reaches for a backpack, people joke and say, run. Similarly, if you see a jalopy pulling up with a bunch of black people in it and they got their pants around the ankles, you're going to run also. And I'm saying the same thing. The difference is the latter happens much more often. It's much more common. In Chicago, there's like 10,000 carjackings and car thefts every day. It's in the thousands. It happens all the time. How many mass shootings committed by autistic SSRI white people? I don't even know. I mean, it's probably in the single digits in the last decade in this city. That's the difference, and everybody knows that. But you're really just trying to carry water for liberal ideology. It's an ideological position.
I'm not. No, I'm really not. I can absolutely say, yes, there is way too much black on black crime, for example, involving guns in Chicago.
And black on white also.
Yes, but there is way too much gun violence in Chicago, right? I mean, it's indisputable. I've got no problem saying that. The difference is I don't then lead myself into a thought process where I have to avoid all black people in case they shoot me.
So again, we looked at that data, and Chicago in recent years has seen between 3 and 5 carjackings a day. 3 to 5. That's really high. That's 3 to 5 too many, but it's not tens of thousands. Even if that number is out by a factor of 10, and of course crime can be underreported for a bunch of reasons, he's talking still complete nonsense, right? Tens of thousands, 3 to 5. 1 in 5, 70 in 100,000. There's a pattern here, folks. Regarding shootings in Chicago, there are between 6 and 7 a day in recent years. Again, way too high. 6 to 7, too many. But it's not tens of thousands of shootings and carjackings every day. We're talking single digits for both. I'm not making excuses. That's really bad. It's not acceptable. It should be solved by politicians. But it's wildly at odds with what he's claiming. Again, do you think quickly this is the same trick of trying to will into existence a series of conditions, a sort of racialized political ferment that catalyzes the conditions for civil war? I mean, that's
100%.
Because that's a huge claim, right? If you're saying that somebody is trying to speak into existence a race war, a civil war where people shoot each other on the street for how they look, you would presumably then you categorize this guy as a kind of terrorist.
I don't know about the categorization as a terrorist, but with legal implications, but I certainly think it's absolutely apparent that what he's trying to do is foment some kind of race war in the United States. And again, as I mentioned earlier with the Civil War stuff, he's drawing on the reservoir of past past cases. So, you have in the 1960s, in 1968, you have in Chicago, of all places, the Democratic Convention, and the big thing at the Democratic Convention and at the Republican Convention in Florida is crime and punishment, is law and order. That became the law and order election, right? And law and order was a dog whistle used by Nixon, who won that election, and others, for black on white violence, black on black violence. Basically, it was a racist dog whistle. They used it as code. So again, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's trying to will into existence a race war. I don't doubt that for 1 second. And there's, as far as I'm concerned, there's no secret about it.
We're going to go to our next segment in a moment, but you might be thinking, why talk about this? This is the blueprint for the post-liberal radical right. And by the way, lots of people on the right don't like that. There are people who I've spoken to, reform-curious conservatives, and they say, I watch Nick Fuentes, it makes me want to be woke, right? This is going to be a very important moment, particularly for the American right. And you're right to say there's people like J.D. Vance, pay attention to this crap. Odds on likely, at this moment in time, long way to go, to be the next Republican candidate in 2028. Our final video from this segment, here's Nick Fuentes on women.
You think women want to have the shit beaten out of them, as you said?
Yeah, and it's very disturbing, but it's true.
Do you think your views on women might change if you actually ever had a relationship with one or had sex and actually had a proper relationship? I mean, people say the reason you're so angry about women is you're basically an incel.
Well, I'm not angry about it.
You sound very angry. You sound very, very angry about women.
I'm passionate. It's an issue
you're
I'm passionate about.
You're sounding very bitter about women, as if women have done a terrible disservice to you. But when? You don't have relationships, you don't have sex. When are they doing these terrible things to you that's made you so hateful towards women? I'm really curious.
I don't think that was a hateful clip. I think I was laughing. I said they want men to beat the shit out of them. And that's just true. I mean, when you look at the state of modern women, all they do is lay in their bed, doom scroll, they're chilling out. They're getting a little fat. It is what it is. I don't know what the average weight is, but they're getting a little heavy. And any guy that is playing the field these days will tell you that. I mean, and I know a lot of the Chads. I am an incel. I'm friends with a lot of Chads like Bradley Martin, Clavicular. They agree with me. There's sort of like this alliance between the guys that don't have sex and the guys that get the most sex. We know what women are about. It's the guys in the middle. Guys like you in the middle. It's the beta male orbiters that say, she's amazing. You're a misogynistic pig. Because I don't know what that is. I guess
well, come on, let me explain to you what I think it is. I think when a 27-year-old guy who's never got laid, never had a meaningful relationship with a woman, says that women shouldn't be allowed to vote, they should stay at home, that all they do is fantasize about being raped and being beaten up, that's what they want, that they're annoying, that they get fat, that they get ugly. That's a misogynist. Now, you may not understand it because your knowledge of women is so incredibly tiny, but actually you are the embodiment of a misogynist. It couldn't be clearer. And if I was in a way, you have the deep-rooted misogyny of some of the actual boomers I know. Yet here you are, 27 years old. And most of the current studies show that a lot of men are really disenfranchised from society, no longer have physical relationships with women if they've ever had them, never associate with women, and build up instinctively misogynist views about women. And I fear you're in that position. You're just a bit of a lonely guy who wants to get laid and can't for whatever reason. And it's made you bitter about women. And I don't know where that's come from, but it's fascinating.
I don't know about fascinating, but you can see why Piers Morgan's been in this game for 30 years. And I would absolutely bet my house that all of this stems from somebody, most likely a romantic interest, rejecting Nick Fuentes. Quickly, I mean, I don't like labels, actually. When people, you're a misogynist, the word doesn't matter. The reality is, Nick, I'm a Catholic, you're a Catholic. You were in your mother's belly for 9 months. How can you not respect women? This is such a cultural trope through every culture, right? Having respect for women because you literally wouldn't exist without one, right? You couldn't wipe your ass until you were 4 or 5. You couldn't feed yourself. In the wild and nature, you would have just been, left to die. We're not like elephants or giraffes. The minute we're born, we can get up and walk. We're pretty useless for the first couple of years. And all of that work to raise more or less 8 billion plus people on this planet was done by women. That's not woke. It's a really big deal. As somebody with a kid, seeing it is mind-blowing. And that's before we talk about the huge contribution of women into the everyday economy in all kinds of jobs, teachers and counselors, nurses, every job. They do that stuff as well. And this little 27-year-old pudgy schmuck thinks he's better than them. You wouldn't exist without them, mate. And he thinks he's making it. I don't get it. He's meant to be a conservative and he has, I don't know. And it's hate-filled. Of course it's hate-filled. But it's like, I don't know, man. Maybe this is my half Iranian. If you hate women as a man, I think you kind of hate yourself. I think you kind of do.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's just well said. And I think he's a bitter, twisted little boy. That's obvious. I don't think there's too much to say, too much more to say, except that probably it speaks to the wisdom of women that he's obviously been rejected by so many of them. What else can you say? And yeah, he's just a nasty little angry pus pimple of misogyny. And by the way, I feel much more sanguine with labels. I'm very happy to say he's a vile little shit, really.
Yeah. I think labels they're useful, but sometimes people focus on the labels. Is this person this or that?
Yeah.
Are they a fascist? Are they a racist? I think it's just kind of sad.